Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Spirit Fed, Body Led. And I am your host, Dr. Julie Tumoon, and I'm really blessed to be here with you today. This is an interesting time of year, and that's what today's talk is going to be about, is the time of year we're in and how to use this time of year for our cultivation. Now, before I get started, I just want to say that you can look forward to in the next few months. There's going to be a book that I'm in the process of editing that is about how to journey to being a body-led human and how to do that connection work with your body and clear what tends to get in the way, which is a vast amount of dampness, and dampness not just as a physical substance that we go at physically, but a dampness as a demonstration of our disconnect from the divine, actually, and how to cultivate that reconnection and therefore drain the dampness and come more alive and feel truly blessed in our life. So you can look forward to that. I also want to share that I have some incredible alchemical formulas that are about to be released, which are aimed at nourishing the alchemy within us, bringing balance to our body, and fostering a sense of true aliveness so that we can really live the life that we're meant to live and participate in the ways that we know we're meant to participate. So you can look forward to that as well. Stay tuned for more information as those things become available. So I'm talking about all these things I'm doing, which is ironic because the topic of today's conversation is not doing, but being. And today is December 8th when I'm recording this. And on December 7th, in Chinese medicine, the day is significant. It's actually called, I always want to pronounce it correctly, so please give me a second to find my wording. It's Da Jue is how it's pronounced. And this is a day, Daxue, Daxue, major snow. So, of course, cosmologically, it signifies that the weather has changed, right? And it's turning more towards, at least those in the northern hemisphere, it's turning more towards the cold weather experience. And it was always to signify when things were starting to go into that very, very yin state. So yang is fire and movement and activity, and yin is stillness and cold and quiet. And so this time of year in the northern hemisphere, we are at the most yin time of year. And you can look at it through the lens of the solstices, the winter solstice, summer solstice. So summer solstice is the most young day of the year. And it's the longest day of the year. So we have the most daylight. And of course, it happens in late June. So summer is starting to actually be fully open. It's finally warm, if not hot. And we're all in that summer vibe. We're moving and we're, out in the world. And because there's daylight longer, we're doing things longer into the day. Our activities can last till 9, 10 o'clock at night. And we feel energized by all that light and heat and activity. And it matches us. But this time of year, December 21st, is that most yin day of the year. It's the shortest day of the year, the least amount of light. And of course, it comes also for many of us with much colder temperatures. And so at that point, we are talking a time of stillness. Now, there's an irony because it's the opposite of how most of us are this time of year. Despite the darkness, despite the cold, if you think of the time pretty much between Halloween and New Year's, it is frenetic. Almost frantic in some cases. Over all of my decades in medicine, I have to say this time of year, people just kind of like come in with the wide just eyes like, oh, I barely fit this in. I barely fit a treatment in. I'm so busy. There's so many things to do, between kids' activities, family activities, work activities, holiday parties, volunteer opportunities. They have to cook. There's the cookie thing. There's the special dinner with friends. It's just this constant, voracious, consuming based activity level, which is so interesting because this time of year, in that instance, we're not matching the cosmology of nature with our body. We're doing the opposite. So nature says, slow down, find stillness, build that stillness within you. And society says, oh no, it's holiday lights and it's travel and it's champagne and it's cookies and that's the other thing, right? Over the years, I've had so many people come to me just burdened by the overindulgence. And there's no wonder then that there's a whole industry built off of you starting a New Year's diet because you feel so sluggish and damp and kind of icky, heavy, bloated after 2 months of overindulgence. And so there's a whole industry that's built off of encouraging you to overindulge and then encouraging you to adopt a rabid New Year's resolution. And all of it is out of alignment with the way that energy works in our body. Why do I care about this so much? Because people always wonder, why does it matter? It's just a good time, or it's just me engaging in life. And I'm a fan of all of those things. I'm not asking you to disconnect from life unless that's really what your body needs you to do. But we don't spend much time in a true space of stillness as a society. Our version of stillness is watching a show, or maybe when we go to sleep. But if you look at the number of people who experience sleep issues, obviously that's not even translating as a huge degree of stillness. No, we do stillness by looking at our phone, or even probably more challenging, scrolling our phone while watching the TV, where there's no aspect of us that's still, except for maybe we aren't physically moving very much. But there's no cultivative nature to that kind of stillness. It doesn't build something more. In fact, it's still extraordinarily taxing. We don't have a practice of true stillness, and this has a cost. And this is coming from someone who understands it deeply. So let me just tell you, if I look back at most of my life, I feel like I regarded stillness as failure because it was only in the act of doing that I felt anything ever got accomplished. I have multiple higher education degrees, graduate school degrees, and to get through those kind of programs, you have to be on all the time. And then I finished grad school with a 1-year-old and then started a practice with a 1-year-old. You have to be on all the time. And then I had my next child and my next child, running private practice in business for myself. And there's this notion that you have to be on all the time. Because if you aren't on, nothing gets done, because who's going to do it if not you? Now, little did I know that truly that model of who's going to do it if not me was part of me slipping out of my powerhouse, which is I'm a water element human. And I was slipping into an earth element perspective where I was moving forward and staying constantly busy out of more of a resentment and a fear that nothing would happen if I didn't do it, versus action out of a connection and a rootedness that could sustain. And I believe sincerely that this is what wore me down so much. Even by the time I had my first child, truthfully, I was already so blood deficient that it was hard for me to produce enough milk to feed him, and that just compounded with each of the next children. And some people say, oh, that's just what happens sometimes, but it's not. It's a sign of being depleted. It's a sign of vast deficiency. And where does that milk come from? It comes from the blood. So my blood was not sufficient to support that. And what is blood? But it's a very yin essence. It's part of the yin essences. And so I didn't have sufficiency of that stillness cultivated in my life to foster that kind of balance and robust vitality. That was one way that it presented for me. Now, I've known people who had plenty of milk, but were also deeply depleted. So please don't take that inadvertently as a notion that you're not dealing with any depletion. It can show up many different ways. That's just my experience. But when I, from this place that I occupy now, have kind of taken a view of the past, I see that I really regarded that stillness as failure and would only embrace it when I got sick and had no other choice. And I've seen this pattern repeated in so many clients over the years. So many people who will go and go and go and go and go till they collapse. And then they'll embrace the stillness because they have no choice. They've got the flu. They can't get out of bed. And they'll spend 10 days laying down and the world does not crash. Their life does not fall apart. They did not end up destitute. And yet, when they come out of it, they and I don't take the lesson that there is space for rest, for true cultivation, for absolute stillness. They go right back into the fray, and then the cycle repeats itself. And then it repeats itself. And then some of those acute things become chronic things. So instead of getting the flu, now it's fibromyalgia, or it's an autoimmune, it's Hashimoto's, it's gut issues, it's anxiety, it's depression, it's insomnia. Those are all downstream of this big absence of stillness as one of the key features. And Chinese medicine echoes this because in one of the classic texts, so there are classic books of Chinese medicine, and one is called the Huangdi Neijing. And there is a quote that says, essence is the root of the body. So how do we cultivate essence? One of the paths is to nurture that yin essence. See, you've all seen a yin yang. Everyone's seen a yin yang. So that is a diagram that depicts so many things. I'm sure there are a million layers to it that I am not privy to yet. But I will tell you that what it demonstrates is that yang feeds yin and yin feeds yang, and yang is within yin and yin is within yang. What that means is you cannot spend your whole life on only one side of the yin yang, which most people try to do. They're always in motion. They're always doing. They're always in that activity. They're planning stuff. They're facilitating stuff for their kids. They got a million activities and they're going to do them all and they're going to be on top of it and they're going to do it perfectly and they're going to always achieve. That's trying to live on the yang side. And when I remember years ago, I had a client who this was a challenge and I suggested to her, I wonder if you could spend some time doing nothing, like truly nothing, like just being. And her eyes got wide and she literally looked at me like I'd just spoken, Swahili, or like I'd asked her to cut off her thumb. Like it was just like, what are you talking about? I couldn't possibly do that. And we both chuckled because her response was so dramatic to something so simple. Spend 5 minutes a day doing nothing. She saw it as a near impossibility. Well, I think we started at 30 minutes, but that was never going to happen. 5 minutes was even considered a challenge because we're so out of touch with the other side of the yin yang, the yin. And we're in the yin time of year. So this is the time of year where we are meant to cultivate this at an even greater level. It's not to say you can't cultivate yin in the middle of summer, of course. But the truth is that if we align ourselves with nature, which to me is aligning ourselves with the divine, because we're following the energies of creation as they're expressing currently, if we align ourselves with nature, then we would put ourselves into a yin state. So this day, December 7th, and that can vary, I guess, the day before or day after, but this year it's December 7th, so it was yesterday. It's this day where we are encouraged to remember this essence of cultivation and remember this necessity of building our yin. In that same book, The Huangdi Neijing, there's a statement that says, in stillness, the spirit is housed. And it demonstrates one of the key reasons why we need to cultivate that yin. So I was telling you earlier that I became so blood deficient that I didn't have enough blood to make milk and many other things. But the other consequence of becoming so deficient is that our spirit, so you've heard me talk about drop of God, this drop of God resides in our heart, and the space it fills then is the blood. So if our blood is not sufficient and that yin essence has not been nourished, then we do not have a home for the spirit to reside in. And in extreme circumstances in Chinese medicine, we would even say the spirit can become displaced, where you're kind of like this human or masquerading. Sometimes you could almost think of it as like masquerading as a human, because your spirit is not hanging in your body. It's pushed off to the side. Some would say it could be slightly disconnected. Others can say it's almost like it's scrunched into a corner of you, but doesn't have access to all of you. In this state, we start to lack body connection. We don't have clarity. Our body goes completely sideways. So you'll start to have complex health conditions that are hard to decipher, and that you make effort in one place and it moves over here. You make effort over here and it moves over here. So you're constantly playing like this whack-a-mole game, because the spirit cannot reside in the body, because the blood is not sufficient to support the spirit, because also the yin essence has not been nourished, is one aspect. And the further that goes, the more the body has to use dampness, usually, to shore up the blood and to keep you alive. But the end result is that you feel unwell, and you feel not supported, and you feel not whole, and your body demonstrates that. And we go voraciously trying to do things to fix that. So that's when you might go on like a really rigorous protocol to, detox or clear candida, or I got to do the gut work, or I got to do the liver work. And that's all great. But that yin essence is still untended to. That space of stillness has yet to be nourished. And as a consequence, some of that doing, all the protocols, all the things, take all the supplements, do all the things, it can actually act as a greater deterrent to the restoration of our true essence within our body, because we aren't in the fullness. We aren't cultivating both sides. And they say, like, in the stillness, the spirit is housed. Essence is the root of the body. When you think about that, you think about the root of the body. What would that mean? If the essence is that root of the body, the stillness is part of the essence. It's that root, which means it's from which everything will grow. So if you are not cultivating that, what are you growing from? And that's the problem. Most of us aren't. There's chronic disease like never before, mental illness like never before, people feeling dissatisfied, separate, antagonistic, judgmental, like the sky is falling. And then when we get to that place, we dive deeper into ego, because it's got to be everybody else. It's got to be these stupid organisms. It's got to be these stupid people. It's got to be the stupid government. It's got to be the stupid media. It's all the things. We start going into this judgment and constraint and adversarial relationship place, which you can feel that in your body as I talk about it. There's nothing of stillness there. There's nothing of quiet spaciousness, which is exactly the medicine that's needed. So this time of year draws us back to that. It says, come home, follow the lead of the outside. And I know those of you who live in like Arizona or Florida or Southern California, you're really not experiencing that deep cold, but you are experiencing a shift. That yin energy is still palpable. Florida is not nearly as hot this time of year as it is in the middle of July, nor is Arizona. So you still do have a more yin experience than a yang experience. And so what would it be like for you to follow the lead of that? just a little more? Could you spend 5 minutes a day doing nothing? Could you spend 30? Could you sit and focus on the spacious stillness and not what your mind is saying for 10 minutes? It's a beautiful yin cultivating activity. Could you sit and not need to scroll your phone or look at the TV or use a computer or listen to a podcast or have a book on in the background? Could you just do silence? Could you take a walk and only look at your surroundings without any narrative, without rehashing the day, rehashing the last conversation, planning your next moves, and just be in the experience? When we do this, we access the infinite. And the funny thing is that everything gets replenished. I've been self-cultivating for a very long time. I remember when I first learned Qigong, we would go for these weekends away that I found so taxing. But one of the beautiful things that came out of it is learning certain movements and forms. And within many of the forms of the Jin Jin Gong school that I know forms of the lineage of, there's a lot of use of what they call universe stance or horse stance. And when I began my own personal serious practice and devotion, I would spend a long time in universe stance, and I found it really taxing initially because it's a stance that invokes this space. You have to not effort in order to do the stance. Now you're standing awkwardly, your arms are out in front of you like you're embracing a tree and your knees are bent, and in the school I come from, like you're sort of the bottom of your feet, you're sort of on the edges of your feet so that the kidney one is open and your back is straight and your tailbone's tucked and your chest is out. I mean, it's like when we first did it, I remember being like, oh my God, my legs are shaking, I'm sweating because I was efforting. I was trying to do it. The more I had my own self-practice, I noticed that the magic was in the be and the surrender, and let the yin, the stillness, hold me. And in doing so, the muscles relaxed. And you suddenly found that it was very easy to stand because you weren't using any energy or effort. I once read a blog where someone said there was an exercise forum and they tried Qigong to see if it was a good workout. And they said, well, it is a lot of time spent in squats, but it's not as intense as I like. The purpose of those standing forms is to slip into the stillness. And one day as I was standing in that universe stance, I heard this voice say, it's here where every cell is nourished. And it really clicked. If you want to access the deepest levels of restoration and nourishing, you must enter the states that are yin-based and not always live in the yang. We will all spend most of our life in yang states, mentally, physically, both. But very few of us take the time to spend the time in yin states. And it is through that the root gets nourished so that the tree can grow. And so we're talking about ultimately the structure that is your life. This time of year is when you cultivate what will nourish the yang states of the coming year. What will nourish what grows in your life come spring and summer and next fall. But if we don't do that, we keep trying to grow from a depleted state, and that is what we're watching societally. We're watching it for the planet. We're watching it in each other. We're watching it in our financial systems. We're watching it in business systems. We keep trying to grow things from a deeply depleted state, and we think once we get to growth, we'll chill. But it'll be too late. There won't be anything left. There won't be any essence of us. And I firmly believe that cultivating our essence cultivates the essence of the planet. So we, not just through our actions, what we bought, what we're going to buy, how we spend our money, but literally how we spend our essence is going to build what society looks like. If we have a society of deeply connected, devotedly nourished humans, trust me, there's more resources available. But if we have a society of everyone frenetically grasping at the next thing, the next battle, the next issue, the next achievement, we end up a society of drastically depleted beings. And the resources go right down with them because we are directly synonymous with the resources of the planet. This yin cultivation is not a suggestion, it's a directive from nature, from the divine. Follow the impetus of creation. Slip into the yin state. What would it look like for you to devote the next few weeks at minimum to cultivation of that stillness? To finding out if you can sit in a space and not think. If you can just receive the energy and merge with the oneness within and all around you. What would that look like? What would it do in your life? Can you imagine what would it be like if you got even 2% more nourished this winter than the previous one? What if that 2% became 15 in the outward manifestation of your life? I was listening to Eckhart Tolle, and he gave a quote from the Bible that basically said, when all the flowers are sitting in beingness, they're completely provided for. I'm sure I butchered that, but you get the essence. The yin stillness is how the yang flourishes. So if you want more abundance, which is a much more yang experience, you need to build the yin. Yes, you will end up taking inspired action from that. But where's your inspiration? Because the yin is that thing that nourishes the root. Therefore, it cultivates the inspiration for the movement, for the next step, for the next thing you need to do to accomplish that goal. But if we're never nourishing it, we don't ever have a root to build from. That's what this time of year employs you to do. Implores, not employs. So we had December 7th. We have the winter solstice, the most yin day of the year. You're in this few weeks before the light starts to return. We're still in a more yin time of year as we head, I always think of it as around the bend into the next year and towards, moving towards spring again. So if you spent this time of year, maybe not frenetically getting that gym membership, starting to take those really intense classes so you can have a summer bod. There's nothing wrong with that, but maybe partner that with yin stillness and silence and nourishing that part of you so that there's something to build from, so that your root has a root. This is because this will provide more movement in your life. So ways to build that yin stillness, of course. We've talked about being in nature and just truly being with the trees, with the sky, with the snow, just taking it in, witnessing it without comment, judgment, valuation, just in the stillness. You certainly also, one of my favorites is to lay flat on the floor on my back with my palms up and see how much of my body I can surrender to the floor. It may surprise you, because sometimes it's not a lot of your body you're willing to surrender to the floor, but it's an exercise in giving up control and allowing the spaciousness to find you. And as you lay there on the floor, breathing in through the soles of your feet, up your legs to your chest, and then feel that breath release the tension as it goes out through your feet, and doing it again and again, and then doing the same thing with your arms, nourishing that stillness, being present with it. It is an act of presence. That's the funny thing. It's not an act of movement or mental wrangling, but it is an act of devoted presence. And when we do that, we come alive in ways that you can only imagine. So I wish you stillness this season and for today and for the next few weeks and through the winter months, so that you may build something magnificent as we turn back towards the light and build that yang energy in all of us. Until next time, many blessings. Have a beautiful day. I'll see you later.